The 12th century witnessed the decline of the Almoravid dynasty in North Africa and Andalusia. The Almoravids, once a powerful force, had grown complacent. Their rule, initially marked by religious zeal, had softened. This led to social laxity. The people grew dissatisfied with the Almoravids' inability to maintain order and defend against external threats. This period of weakness created a vacuum, an opportunity for a new power to emerge. The Almoravids relied heavily on Maliki lawyers for religious authority. These urban scholars, while learned, seemed out of touch with the common people, particularly the Berbers of the Atlas Mountains. The Berbers, feeling marginalized and spiritually unfulfilled, yearned for a return to a purer form of Islam. They sought guidance that resonated with their cultural sensibilities and addressed their concerns. This yearning for religious revival coincided with the arrival of a charismatic Berber scholar, Muhammad ibn Tumart. Ibn Tumart, hailing from the Masmuda tribe, would come to play a pivotal role in shaping the destiny of North Africa and Andalusia. His teachings, deeply rooted in Islamic principles, would ignite a movement that challenged the status quo and ultimately led to the rise of a new dynasty, the Almohads. The Almohads, an originally Spanish form from Al-Muwahhidun, those who proclaimed God's unity, represented a protest against the social laxity of life under the later Almoravids and the urban attitudes of the Maliki lawyers who were the mainstay of Almoravids' religious authority. The Muwahhid movement began in the High Atlas Mountains in around 1121. It was led by a scholar called Muhammad ibn Tumart, a Berber from the Masmuda tribe. After making the pilgrimage to Mecca, he remained in the east and had studied the ideas of al-Ghazali and al-Ash'ari in Baghdad and Damascus. On returning to Morocco, he was hailed by his followers as the Mahdi, the promised charismatic leader who would restore and cause to triumph the true and universal Islam. For the Berbers of southern Morocco, he made available in their own language Muslim creeds, theological and legal works. He returned to the High Atlas and first went to Agmat, the burial place of Al-Mutamid of Seville, where he sought to deepen the Berbers' understanding and practice of Islam. From Agmat, Ibn Tumart moved to Tinmol, where he established a ribat and eventually became the means by which another great revival of Islam was initiated, at a time when the rule of the Almoravids had begun to decline in North Africa and Andalus. The initial years of the Almohad movement were marked by constant struggle against the Almoravids. Ibn Tumart's fiery sermons and his calls for reform had ignited a firestorm of religious fervor, particularly amongst the Berber tribes. These tribes, feeling increasingly marginalized under Almoravid rule and deeply inspired by Ibn Tumart's message, flocked to his banner, eager to fight for a return to what they perceived as a purer form of Islam. The Almoravids, initially dismissive of Ibn Tumart and his followers, soon realized the gravity of the threat they posed. The Almohads, driven by their unwavering belief and their mastery of the rugged Atlas Mountain terrain, proved to be formidable adversaries. They launched a series of guerrilla attacks, disrupting Almoravid supply lines, ambushing their patrols, and gradually chipping away at their control over the region. Despite their early successes, the Almohads faced significant challenges. The Almoravids, though weakened by internal strife and complacency, still possessed a larger army and greater resources. They launched several punitive expeditions into the Atlas Mountains, attempting to crush the rebellion. These expeditions, however, often met with fierce resistance, and the Almoravids found themselves bogged down in a protracted and costly conflict. The Almohads' early struggles were not solely military. They also faced internal divisions and challenges to Ibn Tumart's leadership. Some questioned his messianic claims, while others resisted his strict interpretations of Islamic law. These internal disagreements, however, were often suppressed in the face of the common enemy, and Ibn Tumart's authority, bolstered by his charisma and his followers' unwavering belief in his divine mission, remained largely intact. Upon the death of Ibn Tumart in 1130, his lieutenant Abd al-Mumin assumed leadership of the movement. He carried on the war against the Almoravids, revitalizing and reawakening the practice of Islam yet again wherever he went. In 1145, the Almoravid ruler Tashufin, who had fought the Almohads in North Africa ever since he had become the leader 2 years earlier, fell down a precipice and was killed while galloping away in flight by night from Abd al-Mumin. Abd al-Mumin gradually took over all Almoravid territory in North Africa and after 1147 made the Almoravid capital of Marrakesh his own. He also recovered all lands previously controlled by the Almoravids in Andalus. As Abd al-Mumin's star rose, the Almoravid dynasty continued its descent into chaos and decline. Weakened by internal divisions and defeats, they struggled to maintain power. Their demoralized army was no match for the disciplined Almohad forces. In 1147, Abd al-Mumin captured Marrakesh, marking the end of Almoravid rule. This ushered in a new era under Almohad dominance. Abd al-Mumin chose to live in simpler quarters, reinforcing his image as a humble leader. This gesture resonated with his followers. With Morocco under control, Abd al-Mumin turned to Al-Andalus. In Andalus, there was a power vacuum during the war between the Almoravids and Almohads, in which some local groups like the Taifas of the previous century reappeared, for example at Valencia, Córdoba, and Murcia. Also at this time, the Christian kingdoms of the north kept moving south, taking towns and cities from the Muslims. In 1145, Abd al-Mumin dispatched an army to Andalus and soon occupied the greater part of the Muslim-held territory there. First, they took Algeciras. In the next 4 years, they spread northwards, taking Seville and Malaga in 1146 and Córdoba and Jaén in 1149. The Almoravids faced attacks from both Christians and Almohads. Their empire crumbled under internal contradictions and Almohad advances. The collapse marked a turning point in North African history. The Almohads emerged as the dominant power, poised to establish a vast empire. Their rise represented a fundamental shift in the political and religious landscape. Abd al-Mumin consolidated the Almohad Empire, balancing Berber support and centralized administration. He established a theocratic state, enforcing strict Islamic law and reforms. Abd al-Mumin promoted economic prosperity, trade, and infrastructure. He created a standing army and centralized tax system. Patronizing scholars and artists, he fostered a vibrant cultural life. The siege of Almeria was a major turning point in the fight between the Almohads and the Christian kingdoms. The Christian and Almohad forces finally met decisively at the town of Almeria, which the Christians had taken in 1147. The Almohads, fresh from North Africa, aimed to control Al-Andalus and push back the Christians. The Christians saw a chance to reclaim lost lands and gathered their armies. The siege was long and bloody, showcasing the skill and determination of both sides. Led by Abu Hafs Umar al-Hintati, the Almohads began the siege in 1151. The defenders, a mix of soldiers from various regions, fought fiercely. The battle raged for months with daring raids and counterattacks. The Almohads used siege weapons and tactics to breach the city. The defenders fought back with arrows and desperate attacks. Both sides faced supply issues and exhaustion. The Almohads struggled with dwindling supplies and sickness. The defenders were running out of soldiers. The fate of Almeria hung in the balance. The Almohads failed to regain control over the city, and for the next 2 years the struggle continued. It was during this period that the Christians regained control of what then became known as the Kingdom of Portugal. Their first king, Alfonso Enriquez, completed the reconquest of his country by 1148 with the assistance of English, French and German crusaders who had been driven onto his coasts by a storm. Whether Abd al-Mumin was aware of it or not, his armies would soon be facing the Christians not only of Iberia, but also much of southern Europe. A powerful Almohad kingdom, with its capital at Seville, was formed on both sides of the Straits of Gibraltar. The countryside of North Africa had become economically disrupted and socially and politically disturbed by influxes of nomadic Arabs from the east, and the coastlands were being harassed by Norman Christian raiders. With his highly effective military and naval forces, Abd al-Mumin conquered as far as Tunis and Tripoli, uniting all of North Africa under Almohad rule. The Ayyubid Sultan, Salahuddin, requested Almohad ships for his war against the Crusaders, but his request was denied. The Almohads would eventually assume the title of Khalifa for their rulers. In 1151, Abd al-Mumin sent an army of 20,000 men under the general Abu Hafs to retake Almeria. Ibn Mardanish, who was the Muslim ruler of Valencia, Murcia, and the whole of eastern Andalus, had made a pact with the Christians in order to retain his power. He sought the aid of the Lord of Barcelona to help him defeat the Almohads, fearing that if Almeria was taken, he too would lose his kingdom. When Abu Hafs approached Almeria and laid siege to it, he was surprised by being attacked by Ibn Mardanish's forces from behind. Eventually, Ibn Mardanish, recognizing the shame of his act in attacking his fellow Muslims in support of the Christians, desisted and marched off, leaving the battlefield. When the Christians inside the castle of Almeria saw Ibn Mardanish go away, they thought Almohad reinforcements were coming and decided to surrender the city to the Almohads. After this victory, the conquest of Andalus spread quickly. Abd al-Mumin's reign marked a turning point in Almohad history. He transformed the Almohads into a powerful political and military force. In 1147, he embraced the title of Caliph, challenging the Abbasid caliphs. This move legitimized his rule and set the stage for future conflicts. Abd al-Mumin established a hierarchical administrative structure. He formalized the role of Islamic scholars and promoted mosque construction. These actions consolidated his power and aimed to create a truly Islamic state. By 1160, Abd al-Mumin ruled over the whole of North Africa up to Tripoli and the whole of Andalus in the south of the Iberian Peninsula. During Abd al-Mumin's rule, he was able to create a powerful and large empire. Towards the end of his life, he put together an impressive and large army to conquer the Christian kingdoms of the north once and for all, and to continue on to conquer all of Europe. Unfortunately, Abd al-Mumin died in 1163 and his plans were not accomplished. The Almohad dynasty presided over significant cultural and intellectual flourishing. Abd al-Mumin patronized scholars, poets and artists, attracting brilliant minds to his court. Cities like Marrakesh, Seville and Cordoba became renowned centers of learning. The Almohads were enthusiastic patrons of architecture. They undertook ambitious construction projects, erecting magnificent mosques, palaces, and public buildings. The Qutubiyya Mosque and the Giralda stand as testaments to Almohad architectural grandeur. These structures blended traditional Moorish styles with innovative design elements. The Almohad court became a hub for intellectual discourse. Philosophers and theologians engaged in lively debates on various subjects. This intellectual ferment fostered a climate of inquiry and innovation. The Almohads played a significant role in preserving and transmitting classical knowledge. They established libraries and scriptoria, preserving ancient Greek and Roman texts. This effort ensured the survival of these works, crucial for the European Renaissance. The Almohad dynasty's legacy extends far beyond their conquests. Their impact resonated in religious reform, emphasizing Tawheed, the absolute unity of God. They reformed the judiciary, appointing judges based on piety and knowledge. Their story is a complex tapestry of ambition, piety, and reform. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe.